Well, hello and welcome along to a special We Happy Few 506, the Nearly Men podcast. And it's special for many reasons. One, because I'm here with my beautiful co-host, Doug. How are you, Dougie?
I'm very well, thank you, Matthew.
And we have a guest on by the name of Sarah Richards, who is a expert in her field. She's also my elder sister, so this could go anyway. Might I preface this podcast with the following? And how sibling is this? She's the expert in her field. So I said, in preparing for this podcast, why don't you write 10 questions you'd like to be asked? And I'll ask them because you'll know the answer. And about 6 o'clock last night, I got a message, typical elder sister, yeah, I can't think of anything. Why don't you do it? So this is one of those, go get me a sandwich, I'll time you type thing. Um, Listen, guys, you guys can chime in with this, but I have to talk about something before we get cracking, and I will explain what we're going to talk about. There's been quite a lot of people reaching out to me online because, as you know, I spent the summer in North Carolina. I was there between June and September, and it has just been hit by, is it Hurricane Helena?
Yep.
So where I was, because I was looking at it on the news before it hit, was in the eye of the storm. Like literally the eye of the storm passed right over Barnardsville, which is in between Weaverville and Asheville. And I don't want to put it online or anything, but if you go to the Barnardsville Facebook page and you can kind of see it there, but my mate whose land I was on has sent me the pictures. The place has been flattened, like
Wow.
flattened. The airstream I was camping out in has been flattened by a tree. Everything has gone. People's houses have gone. Everything they own has just been washed away, and it's like a really beautiful little rural community. And I don't know, they deserve help, man. It's I don't know how or why, but if there's any type of funding or Kickstarter or GoFundMe, if you can go find it, guys, because literally people have got nothing now, and it's one of those little rural communities where you've got a little white house with a porch that you sit on, but you don't have anything else. But it's okay because you got your little white house and the porch. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And they've just been washed away. Like literally, the whole of the valley has been just washed away. The
Wow.
roads have been upturned. Nobody can get there. It's, I mean, I'm very thankful I'm not there, but honestly is they've been devastated.
So the building you were working on was is gone.
That hasn't gone, obviously, because of my construction skills. Um, Didn't make light on
Superior construction skill.
the thing is, that's up a mountain.
Right.
So although rivers were running, and there's a little stream that runs through the valley where it is, I mean, it's now like as wide as a road and 6 foot deep. But what's happened is that because Barnardsville's in a sort of plateau in between mountains, like on all sides, everything just washed down and then got sucked downhill. Do you know what I mean? So anything in the plateau just got this water pressure and then sucked downhill. Trees uprooted, trucks gone.
Oh wow.
I don't know if there's any fatalities because nothing's come up online, but it is absolutely devastated.
The American Herbalist Guild Conference, which is supposed to be next weekend, up Black Mountain. I just got notification today because I was going to go down there next weekend. Just got notification today that they have put the whole lot online. There's no power, there's nothing. And they were in a big conference and they just today said, no, we're going online.
Wow.
Yeah, Black Mountain's about
everyone who was going to go, don't go down there.
Yeah, Black Mountain's about an hour from Barnardsville. And I don't mean to make light again. I have a friend who lives on Black Mountain by the name of Sean, who I call Beautiful Sean because he's so freaking good looking. And my wife insisted on me WhatsApping him to make sure the hurricane hadn't hurt his face at all. Pretty, which is nice. So anyway, we'll get it. Let's get into this podcast. Okay, first thing I have to do, sis, so that we get some context here. What is your field of expertise?
I don't have one.
Brilliant. Podcast.
But if you want me to tell you, right. The word expert, I'm a bit dodgy with expert, but I have been studying herbal medicine now for a number of years. And just recently I went through a 5-year program and graduated as a medical herbalist. Right. So booyah, that's me. And so I would consider myself to have some little knowledge in herbs.
Right. So what we off air have been chatting about on WhatsApp is how that sort of how we can link that back to World War Two, but I want to start in World War One, just to be difficult, and what sort of herbal medicines we used there and what was learned. I know from my reading that one of the big developments coming out of World War One was in the UK anyway, was dentistry. So socialized dentistry came in afterwards, right, because a lot of the sort of the working class poor that were drafted in had very bad teeth, which means they weren't unable to take in the nutrition that they needed to fight. So right, the government was like, okay, well, we'll give you good teeth. Where can we start as far as, did you go back as far as World War
I did have a look at World War One. I wanted to know what we used in World War One, and it was far more obvious, like it was intentional. We would send our soldiers out with yarrow. We would send our soldiers out with sphagnum moss dressings because sphagnum moss is abundant, absorbs 20 times more its weight in water. It's antimicrobial, so it acts as this perfect, you can pack wounds with it. So we definitely sent them out with that. And I believe the Red Cross used to actually collect and package the dressings and send them out to the guys at the front. And then we would give them yarrow, which is Achillea milfolium, to use its botanical name. And that acts as an antimicrobial, aseptic. So that's your wound healer, your wound cleanser. You can make, infusions out of that. You can pack it because you don't want people to bleed to death and you don't want them to be infected. So those were the two major ones that I know for a fact were used in World War One, and I believe probably sort of as a backup in World War Two as well, that we were still thinking about dressings and bandages in that way.
And this was just grown. Was this grown purposefully? Was it just, or did people literally go out and forage for this stuff? I mean, or was it grown like farmed effectively? This, for medical use.
I'm not clear on that, Doug. I know there was a lot of foraging, but given that in the Second World War we did start to cultivate everything. Mm-hmm. So there was this, medicines were cut off and supplies of medications were dwindled. So then we started to cultivate, not only forage, and cultivate. So places like Kew Gardens, for example, and the Victory Gardens that we know of. So it's quite likely, given the duration of World War One, that we were, looking to cultivate it. Yeah, cultivate it.
And was it given to each soldier? Because obviously in World War II, each soldier had like a first aid kit. They had like a wound dressing. Was this kind of moss and these kind of things that were grown? Were they effectively given to troops as well, or were there like designated aid centres? Were they around in World War One? I think they were already, weren't they?
I believe so. So you're talking to a not expert aspect of things, but here's how I would say. Every soldier would have gone out with his dressing because as I remember my dad, he had a kit, right? Even if you weren't a medic, you would have your kit because if you got hit, you needed your dressing, you needed whatever it was in your little bag, and it was compressed down. So that, I would imagine, would have been your sphagnum moss and your yarrow. And then the medics would have had bigger supplies of that, but then, if somebody wants to write in and shout in and tell us that I got it all wrong.
was there obviously, because in World War II we had morphine that was given to each soldier in their kit,
right?
One vial of morphine, I think. But was there any something similar that grows in the wild? I mean, I know everything eventually comes down to a plant, doesn't it? Eventually, like when you go through the chain. Was there any early version of that before that, or was that invented?
We derived morphine from poppy.
Right.
So we would have been using the poppy. The interesting thing about this is, so before, let's just track back and say a public service announcement to the general public, okay? Don't do this at home unless you know the plants that you are working with. So it's very easy for us to just go out and think all plants are innocuous, they're harmless, and I can just eat a bit of this and it's going to make my headache go away or whatever. However, that's not the way it works. And whilst the majority of plants are safe, there are a There are a group of them, we call them Schedule 20s, that we use as a herbalist, that have a very narrow therapeutic index, and you don't want to mess with those. Right. Now, some of those plants, when you don't have the flowers with them, can look similar to very harmless plants. Mm-hmm. So you just got to be cautious, and that's what I want to say. Like, don't mess and think that, or because it's a plant, it's inherently safe.
Yeah.
So, and then yes, to your point, I think there's only like insulin is there, couple of other things, lately monoclonal antibodies, but most things come from a plant. All the research that we see done is about what does this plant have that we can extract and then synthesize a lot of and then use it as a drug.
Yeah.
Give me an example of that. Give me an example of that pharmaceutically, that we look at something that, I mean, doesn't need to have been derived out of the medical and the combat situations in World War II, but like something like a painkiller that we just think, oh, you know, Pfizer built that, but in fact, it's derived exactly from this plant.
Right. So aspirin is a classic. Aspirin is taken from white willow. So we had salicin. So I think it was in like the late 1800s. I think we finally got aspirin manufactured at 1899 or something. And there was a state where we just extracted the salicin. So the active constituents of white willow come out, and they would act a little like what we now call aspirin. And then it was acetylated. So somebody came along and added additional groups to it. So when you take an extract of a plant, you've got the extract of that plant and you've got all the other buffers that go along with it. So you're never going to get just one thing out of a plant, which makes, to me, that good plant medicine. But when you take an extract and you really just pump the extract, you're going to end up with side effects, which is now what we know we have with aspirin. So you've got this acetylated salicylic acid, which gives us stomach bleeds, which aspirin doesn't. So I don't know where I was going with that, other than that would be an example of an extract from white willow that would give us a pain reliever. Another one that we're doing a lot with, that most people think of this in this day and age, is turmeric. So everybody thinks about turmeric as being like that, but it's the curcuminoids in turmeric, and they're all doing that wonderful thing. And so if we give rats, you know, a massive injection of curcuminoids, and they don't die, it's clearly going to be good for humans for everything or whatever. So, you know, it's. I think what I'm pointing out there is the fact that it's not simple. We can't just say because we got a plant, we got morphine. You know, we got the opium poppy, we're going to take morphine, and those two things are the same. They're not the same. Right. You've got a true plant, a medicinal plant, and then you've got its extract.
And obviously, like, you know, in wartime, advancement in everything kind of speeds up. It kind of, you know, whether it's any kind of military hardware or imagine medicine as well. Where was the center? You mentioned Kew Gardens. Was that a center for this kind of development, you know, through the sort of Victorian and Edwardian age, perhaps? I mean, where was all this happening in the UK? Where would it go down to individual universities or individual people? Like, who was there a center for all this kind of stuff? Or
I believe that what happened was after Amsterdam was occupied, right, and then we were importing a lot of pharmaceuticals from Amsterdam, insulin, antibiotics, hormones, analgesics, a whole lot of stuff. And then it was occupied by the Germans. And so that severely disrupted everything and or cut it all off. And our priority then was to get medicines out to the field hospitals and to the soldiers, and then to local hospitals in the house, right? So then there was this big move. Herbalists like Maud Grieve, for example, she died 1941, so before the war ended. But herbalists of her ilk were instrumental in pushing the regeneration of herbalism. So we were like, okay, well, what do we do? Like we've got nothing. So then we started to grow certain plants. So we grew valerian for painkiller. We grew belladonna for eye surgery. These various plants, and we did them in Kew Gardens and other places.
Yeah.
Also, what was happening with places like Kew Gardens and more previous, they were writing manuals for us to then understand, again, herbal medicine.
Right.
Because somewhat in the First World War, prior to the First World War, we were all in that place of, this is predominantly our medicine. The pharmaceutical industry was early. We'd got like phenobarbital, I think, and aspirin. Pretty much that was it. And then there was this sort of, the pharmaceutical industry came in between World 1 and 2, right? We've got
penicillin was in the early 20s, wasn't it?
Penicillin was, we had sulfonamide drugs, which were similar. They were more of a sort of sulfur class of antibiotics. And their true penicillin didn't actually get manufactured till after the Second World War. But the pharmaceutical industry had then got us. And we were all in that like, woo, shiny drugs. We don't need to use plants. We can let all of that go and we'll just go see the doc. And the advent of the war brought that back to us, brought a resurgence in herbal medicine and self-reliance, reliance on rose hips for vitamin C. And there was also, so the Women's Institute, they were very big in organizing it. And then during the war itself, the Women's Voluntary Service were also very big in making sure that we grew it, that we collected it, that we processed it, that we sent it to where it was going, that the people who needed it here would get the medicines. Because some of these things that we think about suffering, like a lack of vitamin C, doesn't sound too much. But if you don't have vitamin C for a long period of time, you end up chronically ill. Chronically badly ill.
Is that scurvy? Is that
it is scurvy.
Comes from the Navy for not having fruit and stuff like that?
Yeah, and then we think about that just as being like, oh, a little bit of bleeding gums, but actually you end up then with chronic infection, and it's just sort of anything that goes on for too long is highly destructive. Anyway, so that's I think what we did. We there was a big push to organize the production of medicines in at home and to send it abroad.
I wanted to that's just don't think about this stuff here. That's fascinating, but I think what we touched upon there, or what you touched upon there, which I think we should delve into, the three of us, slowly, because there's a lot to unpack. You talked about a lack of vitamin C, and then you get in this scurvy and not being able to heal wounds and your teeth falling out and all the rest of it. And so if we go back to, say, Band of Brothers, and we look at the Bastogne episode, and we look at guys freezing ass cold in those holes with no supply, what's the first thing that starts to go? Because what we think of when we think of sort of casualties, we think of shell wounds and, tree bursts, but a lot of guys are getting evacuated off the line, not just for exposure, but these illnesses that are caused by exposure and lack of vitamins and stuff. And I know you and I spoke about this before, and we sort of got down a bit of a rabbit hole of it. But there is an element of a sort of death by 1,000 cuts when you're stuck in a foxhole somewhere where you're not being supplied. And we'll talk about it. If maybe we just focus on somewhere like Bastogne and what the men there were suffering, because I think it will be interesting then to talk about our grandfather afterwards and what his experience, which would be very different to the guys in the Western theatre.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I was laughing to myself. For some reason, I pulled up that Blackadder quote, the one, because I was thinking about in, wartime, what the expectations, I said this to you, right? The expectation, I think, would be predominantly, I'm going to war, I'm going to fight for my country, I'm either going to get shot and killed, or I'm going to come home a hero. And there's not that much in between. We don't have a spectrum of stuff, and especially when you don't know what to expect, right? But then, so the response to that is the sort of classic Blackadder, excuse me, sir, if we happen to stand on a landmine, what do we do? Well, you toss yourself 200 meters in the air and scatter yourself over a wide distance, right? A wide area, right? There's no question as to that response. But when you are in the trenches, you've got chronic conditions that you would suffer with at home and be able to go, oh, I'll just go do that to it. But you can't go do anything to these things. Where I want to start is with the idea of stress. So when we talk about stress, people say stress, like, oh, I'm so stressed. Like, stress is a thing. Stress is not a thing. Stress is a series of neurotransmitters and chemicals in your body. And they start, so you've got cortisol, you've got adrenaline, all of these things start to act in our system. And they derange normal activity. So you've got a guy who's got increasing levels of adrenaline and cortisol that's hitting his adrenals, that's making him overly anxious all the time. He's got to contend with that before he's got to contend with anything else. Mm. And that effect, the effect of chronic stress on the immune system, is detrimental. Right? Stress suppresses your immune system. Cortisol suppresses your immune system. So then you've got these guys opened up to infection, and they're already in the cold. And then you've got
trench foot and things like that is a big one. I suppose it makes them more susceptible to any kind of infection then, doesn't it?
Any infection at all. And then you've got everybody bunched up. Mm. So then, what about scabies? So I was thinking about scabies, right? As I often do. I had scabies once when I was a kid at boarding school. It itches like buggery, really, really, really itchy. And it's very contagious. And the treatment for scabies is you have to wash all your clothes, burn your bedding, boil your bedding, whatever it is. Well, what happens if you're in the trenches and you get scabies? There's no boiling anything. So how does a guy survive with that chronic itching at nighttime that's keeping him awake? Scratching. It was those things that I began to think, like, this, as you said, Matt, the death of 1,000 cuts. How does a person endure the chronic conditions physically and the chronic emotional, mental strain and still fight? I mean, that's aside from the fact that you've got a whole campaign going on. You're having to pay attention to your orders, oppos, whatever else is going on. It's like, I don't know, just.
What was effectively a cure for that then? So, we've got a lot of symptoms. We've got a lot of people that are cold and under a huge amount of stress for a long, sustained period. And then they start to break down physically. And then they obviously, and it shows in Band of Brothers as well, start to break down mentally. Mm-hmm. So, how do you combat that? I mean, I think that was homeopathy ever involved as well in the sort of mental health aspect of it? Because you see, because they would say, there was one sequence in Band of Brothers, he says, go off the line, have a hot meal, or, one of the soldiers said, I think he said to them, we can get you off the front line for 3 days. So rest was obviously known as a treatment, a very basic treatment for stress?
Well, I was wondering about that, because I wanted to ask you, how often did these guys get taken off the front line? Because in some ways, that's the only remedy.
Right. But I don't think they ever were they? But is there anything then? So, and then also you got to get more nutrition as well, because the food they would have had been very basic. I think they're down to 1 meal a day for much of it in the middle of winter, and that's just army rations, which I'm not too sure of the. It might have calorific value, but I'm not too sure about any kind of, any kind of vitamins or anything that you would kind of need. But as a homeopath, what is there remedies that they were effectively living around that they weren't aware that could have helped them? Perhaps. I mean, they're all in a forest,
right? So. Interestingly, there was a guy at the time, Edward Bach, who was a Welsh guy, and he was coming up with a series of flower essences, not at all related to herbs and the growth constituents, but they had a mental aspect to them. He deliberately developed those for people who were, had deep moods or unable to cope or felt overwhelmed. And I wonder if that, because I think it was about 1938 something, if that came out of the PTSD, the shell shock and the trauma that was inflicted on First World War soldiers. And so we had to, all we had was benzodiazepines. We're just going to basically sedate you so you don't remember anything. Yeah. Who wants that? So there was much more of this subtle flower essences. Let's look at helping you restore your mental health. Out in the boonies, there's not a lot that you can reach to unless you know it. It's pretty specific. And it's the dead of winter there. So what would really have been great? See, what you could have done, I mean, we could have maybe got like pine needles, vitamin C. Perfect. Pine actually is a fantastic medicine. Yeah. Pine tea. You could do it's gonna give you massive amounts of vitamin C. It's great for sinus infections, sort of respiratory infections. You could probably make poultice of it, stick it on something, soak your feet in it. So, and that would be all year round because pine is an evergreen. And then you've got the pine sap, which is also really, really useful. It's sticky. You know, you could slap it over the top of a wound as a sort of plaster thing. It's antimicrobial.
Wow.
Did you ever see?
I mean, you just said two things there that, I mean, I wonder if this stuff is taught in the modern military, because that's right there. You've said two incredible things. So what would you do? Take pine needles and literally boil it, make a tea out of it?
Yep.
Drink it every day? I mean, this is something that was really rich in that environment around Belgium and the Ardennes forest and stuff.
That's what, they were just surrounded by pine trees. I wonder, was an episode, I think it was like Ray Mears, that survival dude.
Yeah.
I watched it, and it's a couple of Aussie pilots had crashed on an island and survived, and they'd emaciated and all that. And then he went to the island and was just like showing them what they could have found, you know, crabs here, mussels here. And it's a bit like that, because I honestly don't think that was used. I don't think they did boil.
No, it definitely wouldn't have been taught.
And they were in pine forests.
Yeah, and the sap, like the sap that you were saying that could cover wounds. I mean, they got so many wounds. They were being shelled. The trees were being exploded. So at the very least, every time there was a shelling, you would have got splintered from a piece of wood or something. You'd have been injured. You'd have been carrying around cuts and grazes. And so would it be primarily the cold, or would it be the stress that would make these not heal? Is it, or is it a combination of the both? Is it a combination of that and lack of food? Or is stress really as powerful? I mean, I have experienced it. I did have a breakdown before I came here, and my immune system didn't work for nearly 2 years.
Yeah, I can totally imagine it.
Nearly 2 years. I couldn't believe it. I'll go to the doctors with ailments, this, that. And the doctor just told me, said to me, "What have you done to yourself?" She says, "Your body is just not working." And I felt mentally okay, but obviously physically it was, you know, it had gone through its process and there was nothing I could do about it except rest.
Yeah.
And I guess, yeah.
Right. And I think one system kicks onto another system as well. So we might start with just a minor ailment, but once that becomes chronic, let me try and think of something. Gastrointestinal issues, right? So say you've got IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and it's low grade, and you just generally get irritated, you get diarrhea when you drink a cup of coffee and eat eggs, and it doesn't happen very often, and it doesn't feel like very much, but the mucous membranes of your gut are constantly being bombarded, right? And they're inflamed. And so stuff starts to go through your gut that shouldn't be going through your gut lining. And then it starts to come up into your brain. And so once that starts to happen, you've got derangement, you've got proteins, your immune system is going, what the hell is all this crap outside of my gut? And then your immune system gets chronically activated. And it only needs other things. Like if you're mentally stressed, then that's another thing that I guess what I'm saying is at that point it could go any way.
And if you get a wound, if you get a wound and have shrapnel in you, or a piece of a bullet or something, or a piece of a shell or something, then that's gonna. Or if the stress, what these guys were under, then it was, the Muckham Penkala took a direct hit, didn't they? And were totally destroyed. I think those added stressful moments will kind of tip you over the edge, because, trench foot, is that a fungus? What is that exactly?
Yeah,
from your feet being wet.
Well, no, because that's the soldier's main enemy. And, they say about, washing your socks and keeping them around your neck. And that. What is trench foot?
Trench foot is a fungal infection It's essentially a form of athlete's foot, but it's so bad. And the issue is, right, if I get athlete, I'm very athletic and I wear sweaty socks and shoes all the time and I have poor foot hygiene, but I don't care because I can spray my feet anytime. And you see, like I can get rid of that infection and it's pretty minor. And I don't think about if that got chronic and then there was a cut and then something got into that cut, what would happen? Because I'm like, oh, I'll just put a plaster on it, it'll be fine. So the fear, I think, of trench foot is your feet get soggy and they're warm. There's a fungal infection happens. It becomes untreated. Then it gets chronic. Then the skin breaks in multiple places. And then you've got the potential for infection.
Right.
And what was I reading about? Gas gangrene. So there's a particular bacteria from the soil that can then infect wounds and literally destroys your cells. Wow. Producing gas and bubbles as it does. It just literally eats away, and it can do it so quickly. Like in 48 hours, you can have sepsis from untreated gas gangrene.
Wow.
I know. So
is gas gangrene common in certain places? Because we're going to go out east in a while and talk about grandpa. Can you get it in the West, or is it more of a sort of, I don't know, I always think sort of mad things like that a bit further out east.
Yeah, I don't know that it's that sort of specialist. I think it's a soil microbe, therefore it's likely ubiquitous to so many places, right? It lives in the soil. All soil, I would have thought, but I can do some check. I mean, it might be that in the hotter places, right, we have less of those bacteria, but bacteria, dude, they are so resilient.
Yeah,
so resilient.
So, I mean, anyone who's watched any kind of World War II, and obviously, and I've watched a couple of episodes of Band of Brothers recently again, and they're always spraying this powder, sulfanilamide. So you mentioned that earlier on. Was that a big creation? Where does that come from? Was that something that was developed in between the wars? This powder that they would put on wounds. You see it happen in almost every episode or any World War II film. They don't seem to do it. They don't seem to do it now. Something has obviously replaced it. But what was that? Was that just a disinfectant or something?
I think that was it could have been anything, right? But if it was an antibiotic, it would have been those sulfonamide drugs, the pre-antibiotic powders.
Okay.
It could also have been a drying powder, like a talc, just to like take all the moisture out.
Yeah.
But if it's on the wound,
it was definitely. I think it was sulfur something, definitely sulfanilamide, but it was something.
Then that's your anti-infectives. Yeah. Your to stop the wound.
So it's just an antibiotic first thing you put on an open wound, sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay. I would in that particular situation, because it's just rife with filth, right? You've got a wound and nothing is clean. No one is clean and nowhere is clean. So first thing you want to do is prevent infection if you can.
But it sounds like what you mentioned earlier, Matthew, is like if the guys in Bastogne had known just the two things from this pine tree, one tree, like one thing that Sarah's identified, could have dressed wounds and saved Doc, because one of the big things about that episode in Bastogne was the lack of supplies he had.
I know,
and it's supplemented so many of their own wounds with the tree sap. They could have given themselves vitamin C from the tea, which would have also warmed them up as well. Like, I mean,
this is like some revelation.
It is a revelation, yeah.
This brings me back to living on the mountain and how much I just realized that life is like Squid Games or something. Like everything's trying to kill you, but there's a solution to it somewhere on the hill as well. Like we spoke before about me getting stung by a hornet, and then there's this leaf called a plantain that you just chew up and put it on the hornet, and it's like an analgesic. Like literally, you could take 3 ibuprofen and like it wouldn't happen, but it just takes it away like that. It's incredible.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I was literally chewing it up and putting it on. I thought it was like Henry. He's a mad hippie, and I was just like, I'm a sister here, mad hippie. I'm clearly more intelligent than obviously. and you
Obviously.
just chew it up and put it on, and it just takes the pain away instantly. Like,
That's
why
great.
is that there? It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, because we all grew up with stinging nettles and dock leaves. You know, we all
Yeah,
grew up with that.
Right.
Right, that's the basis of this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that, though. I have to correct you on that. I mean, yeah, we did. Like, you sting yourself with nettle and you rub a dock leaf on it. I've never found that to be effective. I just have to say, from a herbalist perspective, not effective. I would choose plantain or I would choose something else. Dock leaf seems to make it worse for me. But anyway,
I don't think anybody knows what an actual dock leaf is.
Yeah, I think that's probably
any old crap and rubbing it on there. It's clearly
anything green will do. Yeah. Hey,
it's working. It's working.
Nettle. They also, the Germans used nettle flax when they ran out of cotton for their uniforms. So they started to harvest nettle and turn it into flax. So it's actually a really good material. It's a really good material. And I think we use nettle, the Brits use nettle dye to colour the uniforms because we ran out of dye.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good for the nettles.
What's the most incredible thing that you've seen in like the natural world? Like, what's, you know, Matthew's just given an example of being stung by a hornet, which is like a really unpleasant and potentially dangerous thing. And then there's a plant that completely takes away the pain. If you got anything what really turned your eyes onto this? I mean, obviously you studied it for a long time. It's a passion of yours. Is there anything that you found that you've just gone, oh, wow, I did not know that this was possible from what you've discovered?
I have revelations like that a lot. I'm like, what? Dandelion? Dandelion does that? Freak, man. I just thought dandelion was a weed, you know, and then you suddenly learn that dandelion root has potentially the ability to stop cancer from forming its own blood vessels, like cancerous tumors from forming its own blood vessels. What? I know. It's amazing. Those little things that I'm just like, this is super mind-blowing.
Yeah.
My real passion, though, does lie with the area that we're sort of touching on, the like mental health. Right. That's where I'm just like, the plant, we tend to think of plants as being physical for the physical stuff, you know, antibacterial, styptics, etc. But how they help us modulate our mental state, that fascinates me. Given how mad we are as a species, you know, like how messed up we are as a species.
Mad you are as a species.
Yeah, I'm totally.
And is that something you're actually studying now? Is that part of, you know, your? Have you just, you know, and do you now follow it for yourself? Is there things that you take or that you keep an eye out for? And what kind of effects do they have? Is it like a calming effect, or is it like what?
Yeah.
What does it mainly consist of? Is it teas? Is it something that you take, or what is it? I don't even know how you would sort of ingest most of the things that you would.
You're asking me one question, and the answer for this is you and I discussing this for about 8 weeks.
Right, okay.
I will try and shorten this up. Right?
You guys mind if I go make a cup of tea while you do?
Yeah, go for it. It's herbal. Make sure it's herbal, bro.
No, it sounds fascinating. Yeah,
it is fascinating. So where we might start, like if you had, and we'll come back to the war in a second, but if you had like long-term chronic stress right now, and you wanted to start bringing yourself back from that, I would say you need consistent milky oats. So, you know, your regular oats that we make porridge out of, right? When they grow, the flour has the little seed in it. And prior to that going hard and turning into your oat groat, it's milky and you can squeeze it. That restores your adrenals, brings you back from a very poor stress place.
Wow.
So I would make that into not an alcoholic tincture, but a glycerite. And then I would be downing at least a teaspoon or a tablespoon of that every single day in order to start the process of sort of restoration back.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so not the oats that you buy then?
No, but you can use those. There's nothing bad with those oats, and they definitely have a really restorative effect on the nervous system. Oats and the nervous system, they're just totally brilliant.
Really?
Yeah. I would eat oats if you're fatigued, etc. Go for your oats.
What are you still in that porridge company?
Me?
What's the best way to prepare them, like oats? Just like, because when I have porridge, I just make it with water.
Yeah.
Or do you just let them soak or anything like that? How do you get the best out of them then?
With the oats porridge, I would just eat it straight up. With
Right.
the milky oats, I would make a good tincture or a glycerite.
How do you get hold of milky oats?
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Well, you're not herbalists, are you?
Yeah, well, let us in. Let us into the world. How do you get hold
This is
of
a whole other language I'm introducing you to. Like, milky oats. Okay.
Where do we get it?
You grow them. You grow the oats yourself, and then you pick them. And there are, like, people have farms, like herb farms around here. You go pick your own, and you literally just go and you run your fingers through the oat straws like that, and then you just have handfuls of these little oat seeds. You take them home and you process them straight away. As a herbalist, that's our lifestyle, because that's the way we live, right? You're just like, okay, I'm growing oats. Oh, my oats are ready. Oh, it's time to make oat straw, milky oat tincture, and harvest the oat straw. That's how we do it. Like I say, if you're not a herbalist, these things are like, don't know what you're talking about.
I think like the sort of the longest period of our civilization, we were foragers, right? So was that when all this expertise and knowledge came about during that period, however many thousands or hundreds and hundreds of years ago it was? I'm guessing
there are people that will tell you that there's a symbiotic relationship between plants. A lot of my herbalist teachers will say there's a symbiotic relationship between plants and humans. Right, they change according to what we need. And I don't need to sound like we are some sort of hierarchical being, but because we live in relationship with the plant world responds. It responds to itself and it responds to us. Wow. And so I think we have known there's always been a stream of or a contingent of people who know that, who can do that. It's their skill. Like your skill is being a particularly brilliant actor. Your skill is being a particularly brilliant comedian, right? Other people's skills are they know plants. They can just hear. They can hear them, right? There's the talking to element of it, which other people are like, that's just too woo for me. But I believe in that. I think we taste it. We get our bodies respond, and we smell something. I mean, it's called organolepsis, right? And when you smell a good cup of coffee, your body responds, right? You're just like, oh, it does if you like coffee. Oh, that's fantastic. Smells good. You start to salivate. That's your response to that plant.
Yeah.
And so we have similar responses to every other plant. And if you are sensitive enough, you can then go, I really feel this is working in my respiratory system because I can feel that this is happening. And I think that's how we originally learned the knowledge. As we would call them shamans now, we tend to think of, exclusively as shamans, but I think my great grandfather paternal side was actually an apothecary. And this was a book I got given when I was 13 years old by my grandmother. And I think he had naturally learned the tradition. It was very oral and passed down. You didn't necessarily go to school and learn it because it was of the plant. You had to be in relationship to it. You had to know.
Hang on a second here. Don't we have the same great grandfather? Why don't I know any of this? Did they just, you're the silly one, go outside?
I think that's what they did, isn't it?
Yeah, okay, just carry on.
You were typically going like this. They were like, no, forget it. I think that was one of those shining moments. And I'm sure if I was interviewing you two, you'd have a moment in your life where you suddenly get given something, or somebody says something to you and you're like, what? That's pivotal. That has actually changed my life. And being given this book did that.
Yeah. Talk about our maternal grandfather then. So our maternal grandfather, Jack, was in the Chindits. So he was over in Burma Special Forces, and he was a medic. Our father's a medic. So there's a lot of this runs through our DNA.
My name's Leach, bro. Leach.
Yes.
Hello? Oh, wow. Yeah.
I've just got that. So what was his experience like out there? Because, I mean, from what I know of the Chindits, they were deliberately surrounded. So they just fought right in the middle of the Japanese and were air supplied by Ord Wingate and all that business. So you spend your entire time surrounded. So I don't know what the stress levels of those guys were, but their heads must have been popping. Imagine being surrounded by the Japanese. But what was his experience? What did he have to work with? What was his main? What were the main wounds he was dealing with? Was it sort of gangrene, dengue fever, all that kind of stuff?
Area, wouldn't it, and stuff like that.
Well, we had quinine. That's how we defeated the Japanese in certain places, fought them into swampy areas, and then just held them. And then we had quinine, and they didn't.
Right.
So, but like, so give me sort of like a day in the life of kind of. Because do you know a bad day?
I'll try. So he was in the Royal Army Medical Corps, and he worked close with the Chindits. And I've seen photographs, and Mum gave me photographs of the MDS operating station that he had, and it looks like a dugout, and they've definitely got supplies on that Dexy, the Dexy and rack, the shelving at the back. It's sparse, and there's definitely a metal table there. So I'm assuming they were doing operations. They'd have been amputating, they'd have been sewing back up, they'd have been basically getting people to a place where they could evacuate them out, because there's no place. You don't want to keep those people there long term. So I would say it would have been this sort of emergency medicine where you're stabilizing your troops and you're evacuating them out of that situation, or to sort of further inland hospitals that can cope.
Wow.
Did he ever speak about his experience? Do we know about his experience other than from photographs and what we know from just reading about the Chindits?
It's a sad thing, isn't it, when knowledge gets lost. But he died when he was 50. I want to say he was 56.
He was 56.
Figuration, nearly swore. That's my age. So he died when he was my age. And so we lost a lot. I was like 8 or 9 at the time, and we hadn't really spoken to him about the war and his experience. And all we have is the memorabilia and the sort of anecdotal from Mum. That's it. That he did work out with the Chindits. And I imagine, I was looking at that, and Ord Wingate and was a nutter, wasn't he? I mean, he was just ahead of his time in terms of, So he wasn't going to compromise I don't give a crap. We're going out there with nothing, a piece of duct tape and 2 sticks, and we're going to do what we're going to do. And how much can you take with you? I mean, what's the size of your burden? What's the size of your backpack? What are you allowed to take with you? What's necessary to take with you?
Yeah, but this is it. So in that situation, Sarah, you would surely it'd be more worthwhile to learn about the plant world, especially if you're in a tropical place where it's really rich in everything that grows.
I do know that he did used to say that if a guy had an infected wound, they would get some rotting meat. They always had rotting meat in jars, and they would have maggots, and they would pack maggots into the wound to eat the infection out. That I do know. He spoke about that.
Wowzers! I didn't know that. Because that's the very first World War things too. Because we use maggots. What's that book? Maggots, Mud and Honey, or something. Yeah. Maggots are going to eat up all the dead tissue, stop the gangrene. Honey is bacteriostatic. We don't know that about honey, but it will actually prevent any bacterial infection.
What?
So,
regular honey?
Regular honey will prevent. It's bacteriostatic when it's neat.
Right.
So it also draws water in from the air. So at some point it's going to get compromised, and then it will start to grow stuff. But if you put honey on a wound and then cover it with a bandage, and it's clean, and you've got good stuff going on there. So I think we use maggots and honey and those bits and pieces that we could mud would have drawn out crap, shrapnel, and the clay type mud has a great drawing effect. So we could have used that as well. And then the quinine. So the tree that's out there is called cinchona, Peruvian bark, I believe. That's out in Burma and India, etc. And that is what we have derived the drug quinine from, and chlorquinine. But what's interesting is I know that to be a Schedule 20 herb. meaning it's got a small therapeutic index. So you can't just indiscriminately go, well, I'm going to peel loads of this bark, boil up a tea, and whack, that's going to take care of it. There's got to also be some sense of dosage. Otherwise, you end up with hemolytic anemia. Hemolytic anemia means your red blood cells explode. So you don't want to. So how are these guys like working that subtlety? And I wonder, it will be so interesting to really find people who knew whether we did train guys before they went out there in the art of some of these herbal medicines, because it was so austere and we were asking them to do things and go places that were, you know, out where nobody else was. We would not have done that without saying, here's a pamphlet on this, here's a pamphlet on this, and here's a pamphlet on this, dude. Because this is
I think with the special forces, people like the SAS, people like the Chindis, it attracted people like that.
Yes.
Like the long range patrols out in the desert, if you watch SAS Rogue Heroes, it touches on it a bit, but there was a guy out there, he just decided to go out there and join the long range patrols, and he could read the stars like a map. It was something he was born with. It's incredible. It kind of tears me up, puts the hairs on the back of my neck. It's just like he just was born with ability to read the stars. And once the SAS hooked up with him, they could move indiscriminately at night and do whatever they wanted. The Germans had no idea how the hell they were doing it. And I'm making a big leap and assuming here that there has got to have been guys like that would attach themselves to people like the Chindits and keep alive and be like, look, you know, I might be completely nuts and walk around naked like Lord Wingate used to do, I believe. But I know this, and this is going to keep you all alive.
Yeah. I think as well, people who actually signed up for those missions already had a tendency towards these sort of superpowers. Yeah, you know, because it's hard enough to sign up for a war, but to actually volunteer to be out beyond where anybody else is, you've got to be a particular sort of a person. I know we've said this before. You know, the SAS, you know when you meet special forces. Because they're odd.
We used to meet them regularly, didn't we?
You know what I mean? Like, and you have to be able to command your emotional state. You have to be able to watch your neurology start to derange itself. And everything naturally, biologically, your limbic system is starting to kick up and say, you're going in the wrong direction. That's the direction. Run away. Right? Hormones forcing you. You have to have the ability to override that and keep going. That's a power that not everybody possesses. Most of us go, oh, Mum, I don't like it here. Can you come and get me? That's what I do. So
yeah,
I think those guys, the Chindits, etc., they were the beginnings of they were their own special forces, and they paved the way for SAS, SBS, Special Boat Service, the Navy SEALs, etc.
Yeah,
because they're all mad.
Yeah, we know quite a few of them. Uncle Paddy, he was in this. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Sounds like you come from a long line of kind of strange adventurers into.
So what I usually do, I have a thing called, because we've nearly done an hour. I have a thing when I have everybody on, I ask them a nearly story, but we come back to that. But I have deliberately left a period of time to tell an embarrassing story, because it would be remiss if I were not to have my elder sister on and you not tell an embarrassing story about me, because why else? You know, you've got the platform, you may as well do it.
All right. Well, first of all, I just want to say, I don't know that I talk much about war and herbs. So if anybody has a million questions or you want
to... This is a jumping off point. We'll get a million.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we'll get questions and have you back on, Sarah. Don't worry. Yeah, you're coming back, Sarah. Don't worry.
Embarrassing stories. Here is the one that I think needs to be told, because it's the classic big sister story, right? Big sisters get elder sisters and elder brothers always get the rap for being like mean. We used to live in this house in Germany, Paderborn, and it was a fantastic house, and it was concrete all the way up. So the attic was also concrete, and it had all these rooms and my mother never actually kitted it out. I think we had like a playroom up there, but Matthew and I used to go and play up there, and I would hide and jump out on him. And I would deliberately frighten the poo out of him, because I'd be hiding and all of a sudden I'd go, poo, like that. And then the other thing I used to do is I would deliberately get static electricity on my feet, and then I would go up to him and we had this word. Do you remember Zimbuka?
Zimbuka, yes.
Zimbuka, right. So Zimbuka is a word that requires you to then go Zimbuka with your top lip. And I would touch top lips and electric shock him intentionally. Do you remember that?
I do.
I was just sorry.
Right. Yeah, that's great. So I had sort of like electrolysis treatment to the brain at a very young age.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why you keep going like this.
Explains a lot.
That's
it's the result of too many Zimbukas.
Yeah.
So anyway, the other one, so I was getting someone to tell the nearly story, but I can almost tell it for you. Weren't you going to be in the forces?
I had a stint where I thought I was going to join the army. You know, like Dad was in the army, and it was so very natural, right? When you're a military child, it's just like part of the lifestyle. So I did. I joined the Territorial Army for a while, and I was considering joining the Navy as a pilot.
Right. And then you were going to be...
Yeah, exactly. Matthew, why didn't you join the military? Because you got uncles that were sneakies, by the sounds of it. You let that one go tonight. Your dad was in the military, like grandfathers, great-grandfathers did all these crazy things in World War II. Why aren't you in the military? It seems like, and you're so passionate about it, I'm kind of a little bit, the more we do these podcasts, the more I'm sort of going, why did you never join up?
Well, Doug, as you know, I'm not very good at being told what to do.
I was just about to say,
I think you would have gotten over that.
Conformity.
Conformity is the problem.
Is this true, sir? Is he bad? Yeah.
Absolutely capable of being truly disciplined and brilliant. Yeah. But it's the whole conformity thing. I mean, how long can you put a sort of rampant... I would ask the same of you, Doug, like a really creative brain in that sort of discipline that's only being asked to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I did think of one today, though. If I had joined up, I'd have changed my second name to No Parking, so that my sergeant wouldn't have to keep saying private no parking. I actually thought of that.
Did you not do the OCT or anything at school? Were you in the cadets? See, you was. I knew that. You were in the cadets at school, yeah.
Yeah,
was that enough for you?
I made sergeant as well. I was actually quite good at it. I was a sergeant. Yeah, I was actually quite good at it.
But I've met special forces guys, and when they get to the special forces, all of that conformity kind of goes out the window as well. You don't have to do marches and parades and square your rack off and do this and do that. You're kind of a bit of your own thing. Yeah, I think a bit of a free spirit, just like your ancestors of what you've been speaking about tonight. So, but you reckon you couldn't have gone through the 3 or 4 years regular army to get to that? That would have killed you.
That would have killed me, or I'd have killed somebody. Something. It would have been one of those things where I would have had a private piled. I'd have gone. They'd have been hit me with soap in a towel. Do you know what I mean? Because I'd have kept getting people in trouble.
Sure. Well, that's another thing, isn't it? I'd
have kept getting people in trouble, and they would have beaten me up. Is the problem? I just cannot help myself. The second there's any form of conformity, something starts to go off in my brain, and I'll create some type of chaos.
That is why we don't have any family photographs in the house of the whole family without Matthew doing a thing. Seriously, it's that conformity. Everybody sits there, we're all like, smile, and just at the last second, Matt would do that, like, a face. Every photograph.
Non-conformity. 10 seconds of stillness, and it was
exactly. And you know the hypocritical thing about that, the disgusting thing about that is I get really annoyed when my kids do it.
I can hear Mum going, payback.
Payback. You deserve them. You deserve them.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we've had you for an hour. We're going to let you go. It's been beautiful seeing you, sis, and thanks for all your craziness about flowers and herbs and your incredible knowledge. And I might see that you might be slightly more intelligent than me, because we had this conversation on WhatsApp as who was the cleverest child, and I assumed it was me. But we never actually spoke.
No, it's not really a contest from what I can see. But it's great to meet you. Definitely have you back on. We'll get the our listeners to write some questions, and we'll have
let's actually do some. Let's answer some questions.
Yeah, let's do it because it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah,
brilliant, brilliant.
Cool.
All right, so
Doug, I got a question for you before we go. Daisy Badger, was that a real name?
Daisy Badger, yeah,
it was. Okay,
it was a real name, Daisy Badger. Yeah.
All right.
An actress I worked with. Yeah. Why?
Yeah. Hello, darling. No, I was looking. I have to do some research before I come
God, yeah. Well,
yeah. Right. So I was just looking and I saw Daisy Badger. I was like, I want a name like that. Is that her real?
Yeah, I can't remember too much about. I can't remember too much about the entire project really, but I think she was quite a unique individual. I think she had quite sprightly parents from what I remember. She brought up kind of a hippie, but yeah.
Oh,
was one of them Beatrix Potter by any chance?
Exactly.
Exactly. All right, we're going to close it out. Bugger off.
Yeah. All right. See you later. Take care.
All right. Love you.
Good evening. Love you. Bye.
Oh,
there's an introduction to my family.
Wow. She's the force of nature. She's wonderful.
Yes, she is.
That was fascinating.
Yeah.
Basically, like, figured out how they could have probably. I wonder how many casualties they were. Just to finish off, I know we got closed up, but what's the percentage of casualties from Bastogne that were just stress and infections rather than getting shot or getting hit by shrapnel or something? I wonder how much of what percentage of casualties were things that were essentially, from what she was saying, perhaps preventable.
Most of them, I would have thought. I say most of them, just a high percentage of people just being taken off the line for some form of fatigue, stress, or exposure related.
Yeah.
Just knocked them flat.
Yeah, because I did actually just watch that episode just the other day. I watched 6 and 7. Was it 6 and 7 or 5 and 6? Yeah, it was really amazing to see it again. But yeah, it looked absolutely brutal, didn't it?
Yeah, and now we know the thing about the pine. It's crazy, isn't it?
I know.
All right, should we wind it up?
We should.
All right, thanks everybody for listening. That was an introduction to my sister. I'm sure we'll have her on again. And thanks to all our Patreons, thanks to all our subscribers, thanks to everybody. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. See you again next week.
See ya.
Cheers, fellas.